Okay. I mean, people are coming in, but I'm going to start so we don't lose time and eat into our time. So let me start by just a warm welcome to everyone joining us today, and many of you who are joining us for a second, third, and a fourth time. So welcome. This is the lecture series on the state of architecture. And today our speakers are Marvi, Mazhar, and Pema from Pakistan and from Bhutan. This project, as you know, is looking at the larger project is looking at the architectures of transition, of which this is one, and the first component, which is a lecture series for emergent and young practices, a way of getting also a pulse of what is happening on the ground in South Asia. So today, multiple transitions and the uncertainty that comes with it characterize our planetary conditions, transitions triggered by climate change, shifts in politics, economics, cultural circumstances, among many others in South Asia and globally. And these transitions take on an even more potent question for architects and what is our agency in this whole process of change. Architecture and its different forms of engagement with society, whether it's preservation, conservation, reconstruction of new buildings, or new buildings in themselves, force us to look and question the circumstance that we are building in and address architecture appropriately in that context. And so the question really is, does architecture matter in these states of transition? Of course, we believe it does, and that is what is the focus of this discussion. This project also has other components. We're going to hopefully have a conference in March, and then if all goes well, this will take the form of a traveling exhibition to set up conversations within the different countries, nations in the South Asian context. So today, this is the fourth lecture event that we are having. The first lecture was by Rizvi Hassan and Repal Adhikari from Bangladesh and Nepal, respectively. The second one was Varna Shashidhar and Anand Sonecha, both from India. The third was Vinu Daniel and Rohan Chauhan, who were also from India. The next two, on the 12th of November and on the 19th of November, are going to be Studio 4000, which is an Ahmedabad-based practice, and Sthanik, which is a practice from Bangladesh. And on the 19th, we are going to have Ayaz Hussain from Afghanistan and Noor Khan from Pakistan. And we will announce the other lectures as we go on. So I want to just, before I introduce our speakers, I want to thank the Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute and at Harvard University, particularly Hitesh Hathi and Selman Rafi. I also want to thank the South Asia Students Group, Pranav, Dhruv, Devashri, Rolo, and Amna. And from the Architecture Foundation, its executive director, Ela Singhal, for supporting this series. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Pema, and she's going to talk about the heritage site conservation in Bhutan, continuity of tradition. Pema has been working in the field of heritage conservation since her first appointment as an architect with the Department of Culture, Ministry of Home and Cultural Affairs, the Royal Government of Bhutan in 2009. She completed her undergraduate studies in architecture from the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi and pursued a master in conservation studies from the University of York in the UK in 2015. Over the period of more than a decade working on heritage conservation in Bhutan, she has had the opportunity to work on numerous heritage conservation projects across the country. She currently is the chief conservation architect and is responsible for overseeing 13 national-scale heritage conservation and managing and supervising 39 professionals working in the field of heritage conservation. She is someone who is very busy with a lot of responsibility, and we are very grateful. She's yet at the office as she speaks to us. She has long days and travels a lot, and we're really very appreciative that you have agreed to speak and to share with us this passion that you have for conservation. Our second speaker, Marvi Mazhar, is an architect and researcher. Her practice combines visual culture, spatial advocacy interventions. Recently, she completed her master's at the Goldsmith University of London, 2021, and in 2022 started teaching at the Indus Valley School of Architecture in Karachi. She is involved in the MPhil program, and her present research focuses on representation and production of Karachi's urban coastal periphery and its ecology. Marvi has sort of served as a director at the Peace Niche and is the co-founder of the Architectural Design Research Lab, housed within and affiliated with the Department of Architecture at the Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture's Research Laboratory, or it is a research laboratory devoted to projects within the fields of architecture, urban social design. Her experience in Pakistan, she's speaking to us from Karachi, has been quite extensive. She is an activist, a researcher, a teacher, a practitioner, and she's going to share with us her work across these different domains. She's currently co-curating an exhibition and co-editing a book on Yasmin Lari, The Architecture for the Future. She's doing this with Angela Fitz, who is the director of the Austrian Architecture Museum in Vienna. And so her work, as I said, straddles this incredible range. And, for someone her age, I think it's already quite incredible that you've done so much. So we very much look forward to seeing your experiences and your sharing them with us. So with that, I'm going to welcome you both again and hand it over to Pema to share your screen and make your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you see?
Everything good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rahul, for having such an elaborate introduction. So it's of course my privilege, and I take it as an honor to be part of this program. So I was really excited. However, I have been quite tied down, so I was not being able to respond to your emails quite frequently. So nevertheless, I think today I'm quite glad that I've been able to make up for this program. So just to have although I would be presenting on the heritage site conservation in Bhutan, so I was wondering, maybe some of the audience here, some of the people who are part of this, attending this lecture series, will not be knowing where is Bhutan located. So I thought I will just give a brief introduction, where is Bhutan and what is Bhutan about and what are the heritage sites we refer to in Bhutan. So I won't be introducing myself here again because Rahul has already introduced quite elaborately. So I start off with my presentation with a general introduction to Bhutan, and then what are heritage sites in Bhutan. I'm sorry, it's repeating. And then I will talk about the conservation projects I have worked on. Although I have selected, there have been a lot of projects I have worked on. So I've selected 5 projects, and among the 5 projects, I would be talking about 2 particular projects which are completely different in nature, so which are interesting, so which I thought would be of interest to the people who are attending, and also some of the challenges we face when we work in conservation of heritage sites in Bhutan, particularly in Bhutan. Now, I think when you talk about Bhutan, and this is the, if you just say Bhutan, this is the first image you will see on the Google image. So that's why I put this picture here, so that you can immediately relate or easily relate what is Bhutan about and where Bhutan lies and what you can see when you come to Bhutan. So I think it would be correct if I say Bhutan is the, I wouldn't say one of the, but I would rather say is the smallest South Asian countries in the, of course, in the world also, and in South Asia also. And when you say Bhutan, I think we can immediately relate to culture. Culture is synonym to Bhutan, and it's equivalent. If you say culture or if you say Bhutan, I think it's equivalent. So Bhutan is culturally a rich country. So wherever you go, when you talk about Bhutan, people always inquire your culture, our culture, and our traditions that are still being continued, and we're still continuing, striving to continue in future. And right now, what you can see me wearing is also part of our culture. So traditional dress today, I'm in the office, so I'm wearing this and I'm attending this lecture here. I think if you talk about population, so Bhutan has about 0.7 million people in the country, and our size is more than 32,000 square kilometers. So it's hardly, if you compare to India, we are sandwiched between India and China. If you look at the map, two gigantic countries. So if you compare the size, we are hardly a peanut size in compared to the size of India and China. Now, I think I'll just go to what is heritage site in Bhutan? What do you understand by heritage site in Bhutan? I think heritage site in Bhutan, similarly to any other country, ranges from gigantic and majestic fortress, which we call zongs in our local language, to palaces, the beautiful palaces setting in, it's all spread across the country. And then we have the village sites, rural settings, its traditional house, and part of our heritage sites. And also the rural homes, the vernacular houses in the villages are also part of our heritage sites. And also not forgetting the stupas. These are just few glimpses of the heritage site which we can think of. Of course, it's not limited to this. We have, I think our heritage sites are mostly the religious structures. However, now with the changing time, we are expanding our boundaries into other structures like vernacular houses, traditional bridges, or any other traditional structures which can be accounted into heritage sites. Now, when you talk about conservation projects, if you see here, conservation as a terminology is fairly a new concept in Bhutan, because that doesn't mean that we do not do conservation, but conservation, the terminology itself, is a new concept to Bhutanese or the Bhutan as a whole context here. We mostly work on maintenance and restoration, because now, if you understand correctly, most of our heritage sites are living, it's still being in use. It's not dead monuments, or it's just not just there for show. It's being continuously used by people. For that reason, continuous maintenance and restoration is required for upkeeping and to ensure that building is kept properly, and for its continuity of functionality and use, and also to ensure that it's passed down from generation to generation. For that reason, the conservation has been happening, but the term conservation itself has not been introduced properly here. Now, here are some of the basic conservation principles we follow when we actually work on our heritage sites. So conservation, as I think put in my topic also, continuity of tradition. It's not just repairing building or keeping the building for use. It's also about continuity of tradition. For example, when you talk about conservation or restoration of Zong Fortress, here we have, it's not just the tangible part, the intangible part. We have the festivals, and we have, now when you talk about Zong, the fortress, the bigger, in Bhutan we have 20 districts, and each districts have one of these majestic structures, and these structures are used for administrative centers and religious centers. So both these functions are put in one building. For that, we are talking about continuity of that tradition also. And one of the principle is also improving the living conditions. Again, as I mentioned, our sites are not just for there, so it's used by the people on a daily basis. So when people uses it, and also we also have to think about the people living in those structures, because those structures are never meant for modern times or modern facilities or modern services. So we have to improve their living conditions by doing conservation or restorations. And then also one of the key principle, or I would say the most important principle we follow for conservation, is consultation and negotiation with stakeholder. Here again, our key custodian or our major stakeholder, one of the most important stakeholder, is the monastic body. So that is where we had to have a lot of consultations, and we had to have a lot of negotiation with them in order to make sure that the objectives or the principles are achieved. And the conservation principles, the conservation projects are also used for promotion of traditional skills and techniques, traditional construction, I mean to say, for promotion and promotion of traditional skills and techniques. And then also one of the principles, the last but not the least, is the structural soundness, because again, since a building has to be used by the people, the safety of the people comes the first. So we have to ensure that our structures are safe, it's sound, so that it can be used safely by the people. Our conservation projects or conservation of heritage sites in Bhutan also helps instilling sense of pride for and belonging to our local craftsmen or artisans. And this is one of the, I think, our masons working for our conservation project. So our conservation project usually uses local craftsmen. We use traditional skills and techniques for constructions or restoration works. These are the women doing a traditional way of plastering, and then we have a carpenter using traditional tools for fabricating the timber components. I think when you talk about conservation of heritage sites in Bhutan, it is also important for me to introduce my department and what we do. The department I work is the Department of Culture. Under that, we have 8 divisions. So my division is one of the division under the departments, and our department is directly under the Ministry of Home and Culture Affairs. So under my division, we have 12 architects, 25 engineers, and 1 archaeologist working as conservation professionals for heritage sites. These are some of the major ongoing works. I think we have ongoing 13 heritage site conservation projects, then heritage site database system and inventory research works. We have evaluation and mitigation of seismic risk for composite masonry buildings, research on vernacular houses, stewardship plan for management of heritage sites, disaster risk management plan for nationally important heritage sites, and archaeology. These are the major ongoing works we have at the moment with my division. And now when you talk about the conservation projects, so this is one of the first project I was involved, and I was appointed as the project architect when I joined this office, was the Gatanshi Zone Conservation Project. Is one of the fortress in southern part of the country. So this zone was restored in 2008, starting from 2008 July to 2013 June. And this is another project, but it's in the western part of the country. It's the 17th century temple, and it's seat for one of the important local deity, and serves as the center for the district monastic body. And here the proposal was to remove the surrounding structure of the main temple so that the temple can be saved from, because there are a lot of disaster risks, including fire risks. So the temple has to come out. So this was one of the proposal to dismantle the surrounding and move away the surrounding structures. And the third project I worked was on one of the temple restoration in the capital city, and this is one of the most important projects we worked on. And the fourth project was again in the capital city. However, it is located at the altitude of 3,600 meters from the sea level. So this is again an important project for us. So the challenge here was there was no road connection. So most of these things were transported by ropeway, and the climatic condition the weather condition was very harsh, very severe. So it's snowing and cold most of the time. So we had difficult time in completing this project. I just shown here only 2 kind of temple, but there are a lot of different parts in this whole complex. And the 5th project I worked was still ongoing, this project. It's again in the capital city, and it's again this challenging because there's no road connectivity there. And then here we had to do a lot of reconstruction because it was structurally not sound, because it's built on a cliff, and there was a sliding issue and settlement issues. So we had to do a lot of reconstruction works here. Now, from these 5 projects, I have selected 2 projects to talk about in detail here. So the first project is, again, the Tagatashi Zone Conservation Projects. As I mentioned, this project was from July 2008 to June 2013, and for the period of 5 years. And this structure was built in 1651, a 17th century structure and center for the administration and religious services. As I mentioned, each of the 20 districts have one of these structures, and these are meant for Center for Administration and Religious Services. And the proposal was also to create space for 160 monks who are residing in the structure. And another proposal was structural consolidation. When you look at the upper one is picture taken in the year 1970s. I'm not sure of the exact date of the picture taken. However, the second, the low one was taken in the year 2010. So when you see this structure here, this structure has gone under a lot of restoration, addition, renovation. So it's very difficult to authenticate which part is the original one and which was the later addition. But of course, there are some traces on the site which can indicate that there are some additional work done at the later stage. If you look at the space distribution, so the upper part we can see here is the monastic body, which is completely used by the monastic body, and the lower part is used by the district administration. Now, the proposal, there were three main approaches we used for this proposal. First one was the consolidation part, the modification part, and new structure. And now first we look at these are a few pictures of how the structure was before the renovation was carried out. So you could see the timber conditions, timber members were in dilapidated condition, there were bulging walls. So we need to fix all these. And then these are some consolidation works we have carried out where we have partly restored the damaged walls, where we have opened up some areas which were not used so that people can reuse it. So these are some picture, one of the in the courtyard where we have fixed all this. And then this is again one side of the structure where there was a huge retaining wall which was built because the structure was not, the wall was falling apart. So we had to entirely dismantle that part and redo that part in a traditional way so that the structure can be, the structural condition can be improved, and also it can be made into a better space there. Now, there was a question when we were working on this structure, which part should be changed, not completely, the tolerance of change, which part can take more changes, which part cannot take more changes. So if you look at this picture here, we properly assess and we realized that the monastic body part was found to be more original because the extension has happened towards the district administration part, and the major changes where we have done the reconstruction part was for the district administration. There we realized that a lot of things have been changed, and the quality of construction which was carried out later was very poor and inferior quality, and it did not really serve the purpose and the function what the structure is meant for. And some of the work we have carried out was the modification. So these are some areas where the timber components have been changed, and even the openings the design of the opening has to be yet traditional, but changed from the original, which was before the restorations. And when some of the part where the timber components are in good condition, we kept it and we inserted new timber components so that we do not lose completely. And you can, if you look at this picture also, you can see here also we put new timber here, whereas this part are the old parts, and here again new. Now, if you look at the pictures, modification work here, so this part was earlier and this was later. There have been a lot of questions, you know, why we didn't retain the original and why did we change? And when we actually studied, we realized that this is not exactly the original one. And however, it is done, but still in a traditional way. So it's still, the form is maintained, just that the opening has been, the design has been changed from the exterior part. And even for the same here, so this is the window design before the restoration, and it's after the restoration. Same here. This is, however, here we haven't done much changes. So it's the internal courtyard where it's been used by the monastic body. Here we mainly change the timber components because timber as a material, it doesn't last forever. So we need to change over. That's how I think our conservation principles were also adopted, because nothing lasts forever. So impermanence concept of this spiritual impermanence concept has been somehow integrated in our conservation practice also. Some of the modification or the changes we did was just one example, internal layout of the structure, because one request we got from the stakeholder and also from both the stakeholder was to have more space in the zong and also more livable space. So that's where we have to reorganize the internal layout of the zong to create proper space for the monks, proper livable space, because some of the spaces, they don't even have windows. So we had to make windows so that they can use properly. And also the toilet areas, because earlier the sanitation, the structures, the rooms they have was not so good. So we had to improve their sanitary facilities. So for that reason, we have to build a new structure which is attached to the main structure. Again, without distorting the original part, we just attached the structure there. Again, this is one of the modification we made earlier. There was a blank wall, so they needed a window here. So we put it inside so that they can use the space properly. Again, this is the lower part of the district administration where we made the changes from the earlier one. As I mentioned, this was not the very old one. It was, I think it was done when we had inquiry and we had from our oral interviews, it was found that it was done in late 1970s. So where this was again not done properly. The spaces inside were not done properly. This is when we do our restoration or when in our conservation project, one of the principles we have to follow is we have to think about the functionality of the building also, because the building is not just there for as a museum or to be seen by people. It has to be used by the people. So we have to make it functional. So in that case, however, again, we have to keep that we do not distort the original form. Again, this is some of the new structures, as I'm mentioning, the toilet part here, where we have added, dismantled and reconstructed the toilet part. And one of the proposal was to, because 160 monks fitting in the old structure was not possible. Again, in order to reduce the pressure on the old structures, in order to keep the continuity of the old structure, we have to take out some of the monks out of the old structure and build another structure outside the main structure, so that we can have all the facilities mainly for accommodation of the monks. So this is what we have proposed outside the zone, so that monks can be moved out. Some of the monks can be moved out, and we can create more comfortable space inside the zone and also reduce the user pressure on the zone. And this is before the earlier one was before in the year 2010, before the restoration work was carried out, and this down was the year 2015 after the restoration. So if you look at the original form has been maintained, although there have been certain changes, but overall the form and the context has been kept as it is, so that we do not lose the significance of the site. Now, the next project here I would like to talk about is the Druk Ong Disi Lhagong Restoration Project. As I mentioned, this is one of the temple in the capital city, and it was built in the year 1715, 18th century temple. So it was restored to its original form. This is one of the paintings we found carried as paintings done by Samuel Davis in 1783, if I'm not wrong. And during the restoration work, while we are working on the restoration of this temple, we have come across a lot of important archaeological findings. That's why this project is found to be quite interesting as compared to the earlier project. And now this was before the restoration. So this is how it looked before the restoration. And this is the back elevation when we approach, and this is the front elevation. Again, this side do not have the road access, so one of the biggest challenge we faced was transportation of the material there. And these are some pictures when during the restoration, we took out the timber components, and we realized most of the timber components are not in good conditions, where we had to replace them. And these are some structural wall condition of the walls of the temples. I have not been able to show in detail. So inside there have been put additional supports. And if you look at these, some internal pictures we have taken. So if you see the column here, they have put these two additional so that it can support the weight. And this is the wall which is de-leafing from the means because of the weak bonding between the walls. Now, when you talk about the archaeology findings here, if you see the purple one was the existing wall, while the picture I have shown you. So before the restoration, this was the only structure which was existed. And while during the restoration, we found that we could see this part also, this part of the wall, which was shown in the brown color through the excavation. We realized that the structure is actually, it has an inner sanctum and then it has an outer sanctum. So there's a circumambulation area around the circle. Then the proposal has changed to rebuild as the original form, to reconstruct the whatever we have found the remains, to rebuild that wall and to create it, to get it back to its original form. So these are some of the archaeological findings we found. And again, to prove more, we found some traces on the wall, the floor joists, which have been cut off. So which again, it shows that there has been a space surrounding that main temple. So which has been taken off during one of the restoration works. So they have reduced the size of the lhakhang, not just horizontally, vertically also. It was if you see here also, there are traces of floor joists in the walls, which is showing outside. So this is very interesting finding, which we could discover during the restoration only. And these are some of the traditional floors which was found outside the Lhakhang temple. And even the archaeology finding is not just limited to the immediate surrounding of the Lhakhang. We even have the front structure, which when we did the excavation, we found that this is the picture which I've shown you in the beginning. This was the original design, original temple, which has been sketched out. And then we realized that these front structure actually existed. And when we did the excavation, we found the remains of these openings and walls there. And this is how the excavation was carried out. And even as I mentioned, the temple was reduced in height also. From 3 floors to it was reduced to 2 floors, which can be evidently seen from the. It's just moved here. If you look at the 2 sketches here, and one of the sketch shows that there were 3 floors, and later it was reduced to 1 floor. And these are all the evidences. And one of the evidence we found was in the attic area, we could see the floor material there, traditional floor. That means there was an additional floor above the 2 floors, which has been kept before the renovation. Now, the proposal was to keep the inner sanctum as it is, and we reconstructed the entire outer sanctum wall with on the same location where the archaeological findings or the remains of the earlier walls we found. So, however, we realized that the walls of the inner sanctums were not that strong structurally, as I was showing some of the pictures where there was, due to the weak bonding, de-leafing issues were there. So we had to put additional support. So this is how we put the additional support in order to rest the floor joist or the ceiling joist of the external walls, which is going around to be supported by the columns, not directly going on the internal walls. So this is the inner sanctum we have. So the inner sanctum has been kept as it is, except for the columns we have changed because the columns were decayed and it's not in a good condition to be used back. So however, the wall painting, the ceiling painting, everything has been retained as it is. So we did not touch anything inside. So even only the external sanctum has been changed. If you look at, this is the external, the circumambulation area we have revived after the thorough archaeological investigation.
Pema, if you can start wrapping up in 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I'm just about to finish. Yeah. Okay. This is the, if you see the sketch, we managed to revive back the original facade or original, the part of the Lhakang temple here. So even if you look at the front part, which we can see in the sketch there, so we managed to revive it and we built it, reconstruct it as same as its original how it was. And these are some of the images after completion. So this is how we see, and it is before and then it's after. And now coming back to the challenges, I think challenges, it's again, one of the challenges we face is, I would like to stress here, is that since our heritage sites is living, it's continuously used, changing needs of the custodians, particularly in particular, and society at large, is one of the biggest challenge we face, because their demands and their requirements, for instance, I would say not their demands, but the needs, changing needs. These structures were never meant for modern amenities. So we have to install the modern amenities inside, and these structures, again, never meant to meet the current population size we have. So it was never meant for that. Again, we have to accommodate the increasing size of the population, increasing number of the people residing or using those structures. This is one of the biggest challenge we face. And the second one is continuous maintenance and upkeeping is one of the biggest challenge, because of the nature of the materials and the wear and tear of the structure is one of the most difficult part of maintaining and I would say conservation of heritage site in the country. Disaster, again, I'm sure this is not just limited to Bhutan, any other part of the world faces this when it comes to the heritage site, because our heritage site, again, is, of course, there were indigenous wisdoms were related to interventions required for disaster. However, with the increasing, if you talk about earthquake and the fire, these are one of the disaster which has been destroying our heritage sites in the country. And this is one of the challenges we face also. And then one of the challenges is also the preference of modern material by the custodians. So custodians, they always prefer, they want the cement, and they always feel that cement and steel are stronger than our traditional materials. So this is very one of the most difficult task for us to convince them is not actually the case. So there are situations which could be different also. And the last one is the lack of awareness and appreciation. So the lack of awareness is a very much, I think it's, most of people doesn't know, understand the values of heritage sites, the significance of heritage sites, and not just the values, but also what you have to keep what you have. They don't understand that. They always want to replace, so they want to, if they have a traditional house, they want to dismantle it and build a modern house. So this is again a very most challenging or the most difficult job for us as a conservation professionals. And also the lack of appreciation. People, I think there are only few who appreciates that old, they want to keep the old one, they do not want the new one. So this kind of situation again creates a lot of hurdle for us as a conservation professional working in the field in Bhutan. So with this, I would like to end my presentation here, and thank you very much for your attention and everyone who's listening to the presentation here today. So thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, Pema. Thank you for a wonderful exposition and lots of things to discuss, wonderful projects. So thank you. Let's move on to Marvi, and then we'll get together and talk about all of this. So Marvi, over to you. Thanks again, Pema. Thanks, Marvi. Thank you. You're on mute, yeah? Marvi, the screen sharing was okay. You were on mute.
I'm just going to share the screen.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. We can see it. We can hear you now. Go. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you so much for inviting and making me part of the Architecture of Transition Emergent Practices in South Asia series. My practice stems from contested atmosphere, which leads me to spatial advocacy and interventions. My design methods are primarily based on documentation and rehabilitation, where emphasis on maintenance and care architecture becomes critical. So just to put the context here, Karachi is the most populous city in Pakistan with over 20 million population. Karachi, a hybrid of multiple religions, sects, and economic divisions with increasing stratification. As the city is expanding horizontally, the wealth is concentrated in certain areas, eroding with others with due rights, witnessing the strong symbolic segregation that has come to be associated with space in the city has led to a different kind of mindset where citizens generate a discourse of exclusion. And here in this map, I'm showing the graphic of Old Town versus New Town, the scale of it. And just to go zooming into the Old Town itself, to set the lens, my practice is looking at Old Town of Karachi and its rapid urbanization, real estate development. Here it shows the proportion of the Old Town, which is 49 kilometers square, in comparison with the scale of Karachi, which is 3,780 kilometers square. And to moving forward, here is an important image, which kind of I base my practice here, is architecture and urban development practices combined bring in unusual, unfamiliar events together. Every day, the people make and remake their city by the ways in which they use the city. There's a strong chance for us all to experience the unexceptional power with which we wield every day. The idea behind freedom to experience spatial order is that the city is as much created by the everyday use, actions of citizens as much of those large-scale decisions that are made about its laws, its policies, its architecture and design, its timetables, its civic symbols. So the notion of new built and decayed heritage is what I'm focusing here. There are some of these newspaper screenshots that I have been collecting of delisting heritage by Supreme Court questioning the format of listing heritage properties. Instead of progressive implementations of the Karachi heritage regulations, it has now gone into a reverse. Supreme High Court decides to delist all the buildings and recommends doing another inventory. So we lose out in a lot of time frame in which the real estate developers take a chance and become in that void space. So these are some of the collections of the screenshot newspapers that I have done. Now, moving towards this project, which is creating spaces, finding alliances with the city, I'm going to talk about Pakistan Chowk, which lies in the district south of Karachi, where Strachan Road meets Arambagh, covering the area of 6,633 square feet, approximately. The Chowk is surrounded mostly by pre-partition buildings, few new developments, famous educational buildings and restaurants. The Chowk and its surrounding dust-covered buildings tell the story of the journey of the city of Karachi into decay and dearth of aesthetics. Arambagh Quarter, now known as Arambagh, was the center for press publication, paper market, adjoining the welder Karkhana workshops. We know that the urban spaces, arts and cultural nexus and organizations are what make our neighborhoods livable, walkable, and vibrant. Here, I'm looking at the politics of the plinth. I'm looking at the platform, how this creates a nexus amongst the pre-partition infrastructure around it. So primarily, this is the square, and it's in the middle of the old town of Pakistan Chowk. So just to give you the scale, this is what the elevations and the section look like. And the design intervention was dictated through a mechanism of Mohalla Sazi, where we took a lot of community methodologies of understanding what would they like in a public space of a surrounding like this. Because again, it is a roundabout in a way, and it is from morning till 5 p.m., very, very busy, and also goes on till 8 p.m. So how do we create an oasis in that space? So this was in that square, we had built this in a collaborative methodology of a collaborative urban intervention with MMA, Zoo House, and Intelligentsia Collective, funded by Goethe Institute. Our collaboration discusses planning and building critical construction of prototype from an assortment of evolved jewels found in Karachi. in collaboration with know-how of local agents, becomes an equal and equitable design methodology for cultural exchange. Now, these prototypes are centered on architecture and urban planning techniques that combine conventional know-how with present-day needs. Many materials are recycled, semi-industrialized, crafted, and manufactured, are integrated into such customized constructions. These solutions need to be incorporated into the building's process as a way to make long-standing social traditions and an ever-changing built environment. So the structure that you see here is built in collaboration with the truck adda, which is making of the body of parts of the trucks. And this prototype was made on site, keeping in mind that the frames that it'll create within it while you're sitting and framing the different heritage facades around it. On an everyday use, this is how the space is utilized. Celebrating such nexuses where, like, you know, a banyan tree is celebrated by creating little intervention and a benches and designing it to create a celebratory system. Now, coming to my very important method in this kind of rehabilitation process is Mohalla Sazi, where sitting with the community members and going a way forward. Usually architects, conservators, preservators do a project and they step out. In this case, the space got occupied with the local artists in Old Town. And these artists created a very strong sense of ownership on every Sunday. And somebody wrote a blog, and I came across that blog, and I was quite amazed that the space is being utilized not by just the families living in those apartments, but people came as a community to do workshops and gatherings. So this gave me a lot of like encouragement that how we can celebrate the system of taking art galleries outside of the white spaces and creating these tangible spaces for them. So we did this pop-up construction on site, which helped them to have every Sunday a get-together where they could exhibit their work, give workshops, and the materiality was also very interesting, where you could stand in these small kiosks and yet look at the facades within this spaces. Now, here, when we created this this system, a strong opinion came from the residents there that how we can start thinking about having an intimate space and creating this dialogue, continuous one. So a community center was born in the Sultani Mahal building, where PCC, Pakistan Chowk Community Center, was born because of that Chowk rehabilitation. And this center, I mean, this is a lovely friends of mine who designed a logo, which was inspired by the press machine and how the paper moves through the structure, and then the logo was derived from that. So I'm just going to play it once again just for you to register that how the logo format worked. And this also became part of our architectural design methodology. We took up this 2-room space, we rehabilitated it with the community. We took up recycled material like furniture, desks, and books donated by people of Karachi from different areas. And this building got active. We held indoor, outdoor cultural activities outside on the Chowk. We held qawwalis, art shows, grandmother storytelling sessions for the children of the Old Town. And inside, we had intimate conversations with the artists, with Women Collective for Aurat March. A lot of things took place in this 2-room space. And it also was an interesting outdoor-indoor, but the indoor was in a vertical space and the outdoor was the angan of that area, of that resident in Old Town. This led to another section of our work, which was creating Pakistan Research Lab. And in that, we had 2 very important projects. One was Sadak Chhap, a take on mapping. And the other one was collecting stories. So here we concentrated in the Rambagh quarter, and we started walking and mapping the area. And we started creating these forms, which was counter narrative to the government's registered information. Here we did intimate documentation of where the tile was coming from, archival photographs, where the building what was the signages, where is the signage coming from. A lot of signages were for Gujarati language. So we kind of got in touch with our friends in India. We asked them for their help with kind of translating and understanding if there were any kind of connections with the families who left from here and had their houses. So the documentation itself became into an interesting dialogue. And these were all the elements that we started documenting. Even the water troughs, like small water troughs, which were used for animals as well as humans, and gifted by the families in pre-partition section. So from here, then we got into another part where mapping, like physical mapping, was interesting, but then there were some conversations which we wanted to attach to these mapping projects, and that was Ghair Sarkari Tarikh, where we talked about to aim and preserve the memories and information, but not just from nostalgic perspective, but also to current condition, that what does it mean for real estate agenda in intruding into Old Town. So we collected this information and we transcribed it. It's all available on SoundCloud. From here, now, when people start talking and you give them space and time, a lot of interesting information came out that, if, for example, someone said, if you go to that building on the 3rd floor, you'll see some interesting room over there with these amazing niches. So then Heritage Walk Karachi was born. And it was all very organic. We never decided that this will be an output of something, a rehabilitation like this. This Heritage Walk Karachi is not promoting tourism. It is actually a spatial advocacy system where we take people into these spaces inside and we tell them that what is needed into creating a dialogue, a way forward. Now, these maps that you see are all talking about those radical information that was coming through these physical mapping to oral history, and then talking about these things. So I'm going to end most of the rehabilitation of Pakistan Chowk here, but continue on talking about just like two smaller sections where the architectural practice is also based through these design interventions. Like, for example, on October 26th, I've been like talking about this open Nala for some time, but I've been writing to the government and I've been telling the Heritage Department that this Nala is creating a lot of problems. And I did not hear back. So the Twitter becomes a portal of creating another kind of dialogue where not only the people, but then the governance also starts taking attention. So this tweet, this tweet was on 26th October, and then on 31st, they started the work, and I gave them a pro bono design solution for it with a couple of my friends in architecture, like creating a collective. And then on like 31st, I saw an activity on the Nala. So, this kind of like engagement with the city also creates some kind of a dialogue. And the other design intervention through documentation I would like to bring in as my last section to this conversation is how one can think of through documentation. And here we did this, again, 6 friends coming together, all 6 of them with different professional strength. One is a gardener, the other one is an architect, the other one, like that. We created a small group and we documented almost 64 banyan trees around Old Clifton. And we didn't know what will happen next, but we thought that let's document them and see if we can create some kind of awareness program. And here and for me, like how I said, the politics of plinth is important. The politics of footpath is also something that I am very, very interested in the city. And we created these benches, and this is in a very, very, I would say, in an area which is on high surveillance. A lot of embassies are around. There's a lot of nervousness. And because of these surveillance cameras and all, you can't be like standing outside. Imagine developing and designing a bench there, and where you ask people to loiter and sit around already creates a kind of like an uneasiness. But then we were able to do that and shake some systems. And then the area becomes heritage listed, and banyan trees are part of now the policies. So I'm going to end on that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marvi. My God, you took us through a lot very quickly. It's like an express train. No, but it's really fascinating. And thank you both for fantastic presentations. This is really, really very exciting. You know, before I ask a question, I just want to sort of give you both my first responses. You know, what's amazing, and this is not something we had mindfully orchestrated, but both your presentations are in two such different places in South Asia in terms of context, but still the values that you both bring and your concerns seem to be so similar in some ways at the deepest sort of level. And that's really, I mean, that's just so fantastic. I mean, it's almost moving for me to hear both these presentations because, you know, I think you both emphasize maintenance and care. You both emphasize that as part of living traditions, you know, it's not conservation per se, but it's a much more complex and nuanced project. I think, Pema, the way you sort of really prefaced it by saying living traditions, and you set up for us a very robust structure, the spirituality of impermanence, many other questions which allow you to construct a new significance for these buildings, but yet keeping their integrity intact. You know, I mean, just absolutely wonderful to see that, albeit it's a very strong traditional framework. So if you add a few windows, it actually, within that framework, only enhances it for contemporary needs. But there's a kind of wonderful balance and sensitivity because you're also constructing a new significance. You're not only reinforcing significance, which happens when we talk about preservation per se, and we look at the dictums of the West, but when your traditions are living, we are actually continuously constructing significance. And that, I believe, makes the task of a conservationist, an activist, an architect much harder because you have to keep the integrity, the illusions of tradition and of continuity, but yet imbue it through new imagery and through new components. So absolutely fascinating how, for me, both those things connect there. The other thing that's so common well, you know, first of all, the contexts are so different in that in Bhutan, there is a continuity. It's what, under 1 million people. Did I get that right? The population of the country. And, you know, Karachi is like about 11 Bhutans put together in one space, which is, you know, half the size of Bhutan. So it's absolutely amazing. We've actually seen today the two ends of what density can mean, literally, metaphorically and literally, and also the notion, therefore, that the continuity of tradition in the context of Bhutan embodied in architecture is so much more clear and explicit, whereas in Karachi, there are many disjunctures and disruptions that happened because of the partition, that happened because of the creation of India and Pakistan, that happened where the histories slip, how you construct identities becomes so complex. I was really struck by the chalk going from Rambagh to Arambagh because in Agra, you know, the first Mughal garden of Babur went from Arambagh to Rambagh. You know, it went the other direction. So it's really absolutely fascinating to hear that. The other thing that I felt that was very common, or as a platform, both your concerns for stakeholders and constituencies. I think in Pema, how you almost started your presentation by saying the monastic constituency is something that becomes central to every decision making. In fact, they help you construct a significance. And if that significance is constructed by the constituency and the stakeholders you're working with, it gives it so much more traction, which otherwise in the debates of conservation, everyone is so worried and scared about the significance and how you alter it. And I think, Marvi, your sort of engagement with the Mohalazi, et cetera, was, you know, part of that whole process. It came from within the community in terms of what they needed. And you both employ incredibly different methods. Pema, you've inserted yourself within a government structure, and it's an organization, and it has its own challenges to keep everyone going in the right direction. And Marvi, in your case, it's absolutely fragmented and fractured, and you as an activist are trying to give it coherence as a series of stakeholders and a constituency. So again, the intents are so similar, but the methodologies are so different. So absolutely fascinating pairing of two presentations. So, thank you very much for it. So I'm going to, just start with one question to each of you, and then we'll open it up to other questions. And so Marvi, for you, I think what is fascinating for me to see and watch, of course, I've known you and seen your work, but to see it presented where all the different fragments you put together in a coherent narrative was really fascinating for me. So it is a model of practice, right? And it is, you're an architect, you're an activist, you're a researcher, you document, you're blogging and you're tweeting to the government and moving them and shaking them up, etc. And how do you, and of course, part of this conversation is because these y'all are all just about, getting going. How do you see yourself situated in terms of practice? Meaning you see the potency ongoing of this kind of different modes of engagement simultaneously as a viable model of practice. I also ask this in a kind of pragmatic way, because this is a lot of young people. This is meant for, students and emergent architects. Is clearly there is inherent in your practice a kind of system of cross-subsidy where you do some practices which might give you some income, and then you cross-subsidize other things that you feel very strongly are important as our role in society, right? So there is a very particular model of practice that you're engaging with. And I'm not looking for an answer. I just want you to reflect on that. And Pema, for you, it's a similar kind of question, which is that, yours is a model of practice where you are looking at change and continuity simultaneously. You're working in a society that has a lot of continuity with tradition. In fact, what I was struck with, and I know through my friends there, many of whom that even new buildings have to have the interventions you made with windows on those blank walls, many new buildings actually employ the same kinds of details. So there's a blur between the old and the new, which is very interesting. And I just want you to again reflect. I don't expect an answer. I reflect coming from your perspective as a practitioner within the government, looking at conservation. Do you think that limits contemporary buildings, or you think it's a good thing that that kind of continuity stays? What are the challenges? Because we were trying to identify architects to also speak in this series who were doing new buildings in Bhutan. And yes, we had Christopher Benninger speak, who had come and done some of your major institutional buildings there. But we never found many, and we found that the work happening in conservation was more interesting. So I just want your reflections on the contemporary and the tradition. Marvi, if you want to go first.
Thank you for the question. Just to reflect upon what you just said, it's interesting that, everyone works, especially in the architecture of new development, everyone works on site base, right? So for me, it's important the context that what we are building and where we are building, how the ethical practice takes place with this kind of equilibrium where city is so divided and it's so, there's so much disparity and chaos, that how do you make something which sits in the context? And for me, these junctions make a lot of difference. When I'm sitting with my friends who are just doing development projects and are constantly in thinking of new ideas and new development, new way forward, and sitting here and talking about negotiations creates an interesting parallel. And here I would say that alliances makes a difference. You bring the strengths together. And if I am doing a design which is talking about on the public spectrum, and if there's something very small or something new has to be inserted, you bring that strength in together and you make a project in a collective form. And that kind of gives me solace and a thinking, and that's the practice that I set myself in.
No, thanks. That's very helpful. Pema?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. In fact, a very good question, because a lot of people ask us this question, not just to us, but to any other Bhutanese architects. Here, I think if I see from conservation perspective, I would see that as a, it's a complementary for us, because it kind of adds value that, oh, you have to maintain that and you have to do that. Of course, you mentioned that this kind of limits the when you architects being innovative and going into modern buildings. However, I think here we have defined, or you have identified Bhutan as a country, whole country as a cultural landscape, and the buildings really very much identify the context of cultural landscape. Without those traditional settings of traditional buildings, I think the concept of cultural landscape can be lost. We cannot see Bhutan in isolated, just the landscape and the building separately, and we have to see together. And when we talk about this, I think having those traditional features with our modern building sits well with our context. And if you see a very modern building, I think we cannot differentiate ourselves from our neighboring country. I think with this traditional, I would say traditional architecture or our culture, it kind of differentiates us from the neighboring country. Bhutan is known for its, I think, if you come to Bhutan, you will see the difference. For that reason, I feel that there is it can be, it's not a very, I would say, negative, or of course your question is really to understand how the architects here feel. But I think within that also we can be innovative, but it doesn't not necessarily be very modern. Innovation can happen in a traditional way also. We can treat our traditional elements in a very fitted in a modern context, in a very more, complementary way. But I think sometimes our architects go off board, and it kinds of comes out, the results which we see sometimes are not very what we were expecting, what the country is visioning, or what the objectives are. So again, coming back to conservation, sometimes I think when we say traditional, here also it plays in a two different way. One, when you say traditional, people start treating everything traditional, and when they want to change something on our building, on our heritage building, they say, oh, you can change it because it's still traditional. But sometimes it doesn't, because there's a diversity within traditional. Also there's a diversity, because everything is not same, there is a difference. So we have to keep it different only. If you create, like if for example a temple in Thimphu, and we try to renovate, you copy the same thing there because it's traditional, then we lose those diversity and the interest. I think the heritage, the perspective is being diluted for that reason. So sometimes it's very difficult for us, the conservation professionals, to to understand that perspective of having traditional features in a modern building. But if you see it from the other side also, and then we have to, when we see it in totality, we can totally understand that fact also.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very interesting, because, I mean, the way I define conservation, I define it as an instrument of planning that helps any society modulate the rate of change, right? And so as conservationists in most parts of South Asia, we are desperately trying to save a few fragments. But in your case, I mean, I think that lovely image, well, not lovely, but provocative image that Marvi showed of that building coming out of the heritage structure at the base is the story of most of South Asia, I would think, especially because, I think the other difference was the post-colonial situation, whereas Bhutan in some ways were insulated from some of those ruptures in a sense. And so therefore, the modulation of the idea of conservation within the context of contemporary production of architecture makes Bhutan incredibly unique. And it's just wonderful to see how, in fact, I almost feel that you as a conservation architect were doing more contemporary things by making the additions you did than most contemporary architects doing new buildings. So, it's kind of an interesting reversal, but it's really fascinating. Yeah.
I don't know if I can just a little bit addition here, because
sure, please.
With the contemporary, traditional features we added to our heritage building, this is where the negotiation plays, because that's where I was talking about the consultation and negotiation. Here, our custodians are more for modern features. They want everything modern. So we say, okay, we keep this. This is very important. Okay, we'll give you this part. This part is not so old. So here we can make some changes. So this is where we will give whatever you want, but here, please maintain this. So this is where most of the time, this is like a trade-off kind of thing when we do conservation with our stakeholders.
Yeah. No, you use the word custodians, which I think I just will give Marvi a chance to respond to some of this, because, you know, it's interesting. In post-colonial situations, so that's what most of South Asia has sort of experienced, the custodians of those built environments are different from who the creators were, who were the colonists, right? In the case of Bhutan, you have a situation where the custodians and the creators of that environment were the same culture, right? I mean, of course, there are fragments in the rest of South Asia which are older than the colonial, you know, those, of course, are consistent, and that's why it's easy for us to conserve our mosques or our temples. But when it comes to the colonial buildings, there's a lot of contestation within different parts of society. And so again, in Bhutan, this is a unique situation of that complete continuity between the custodians and the creators of that environment. I don't know, Marvi, do you have any reflections on this issue?
I mean, if I have to think about in terms of Karachi's context, there's an example, there's a building, Frere Hall in Karachi, and it's a monument, it's a public building, it's a town hall surrounded by this garden. And the idea over here is that whenever there is a public building, you want to kind of control it. And that control is something that one is always questioning, that why can't it be accessible on everyday basis? Why does it need to be guarded by fencing or by a gateway? So these kind of like custodian methodology used in Karachi is something that I'm like always like thinking and contradicting it with my own you know, like recently they have decided, the Frere Hall was open from all sides. It's still open from all sides. It's a thoroughfare. People can cross through it. People can sit and dwell and loiter around it. But now the decision of the custodians from the top down is to protect it. And then the queries come out, protect for whom? Why do we need protection for a building like that? Why can't it be used and utilized on just not, and what it does, it also creates a visual obstruction. So it's not just physical, but and then what kind of control movement are you placing? So yeah, I mean, these custodian queries in our part of the region is so different.
And these are legacies that also come from the colonial times, because a building like Frere Hall was used by a particular part of the colonial society, and then the locals who had bought into that society as alliances. And so it's almost a legacy of who it belongs to. And, you know, your question of for whom is a really interesting and important one. But just fascinating how I think Bhutan has bought into the conversation and other kind of interesting set of questions and complexity. So thank you, Pema, for that. Dhruv, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you have questions, are there questions from anyone else you want to represent? Otherwise, we'll carry on the conversation.
Just to great presentations, Marvi and Pema. What's so fascinating is that both of you operate in this very contemporary practice domain where the architect does not express themselves as the author on the projects that you're doing in very different ways, but still nonetheless extremely important in our day and age. I have two questions, one for Pema and one for Marvi. I'll start with Pema's question. The second project that you showed, the Druk Tisa Lakhang restoration project, the columns that you made that are hugging the wall and which are the new additions, I noticed there were traditional columns. And how do you decide at what point that registration is important, whether they should be traditional or whether a more more utilitarian column would work so as to signal that what is new and what is old, and somehow increase the importance of the old over the new, and which is a very interesting question, because to approach it from a different side, if that conservation work was happening somewhere else, not in a South Asian region, with a monument that is not used every day, then that would be a very clear signage that, oh, this is a monument and this is a new addition, and that sort of change is extremely important to register. So I just wanted to maybe if you can comment on that. And on Marvi's side, it's more of a pedagogical question. How do you teach such activism to students? Because it is not, it is a worldview more than it is something that is acquired through normal means of pedagogy. It's not something that you can draw and you can like explain in a dialectical conversation. It's like something that has to appear in the political structure, state structures. People have to be observers and engage with the citizenship of the country. So yeah, if Pema can start, that would be great.
Okay, if I understood your question correctly, you were asking how do we differentiate, especially for that project, the new installation and the old part. So again, here I have to, I think maybe I missed out during my discussion presentation here. Again, one of the principles we follow here in the conservation is that, especially for the religious structures, we cannot leave the structure old. We cannot really keep it old as a old, and then we have to, because glory, embellishment and painting, making it new is again seen as a, doing a good deeds when it comes to religious belief and spiritual areas and the sacred sites. So for that reason, we cannot, if we follow, as you mentioning, true conservation or follow the true conservation principles, we have to be showing the differentiations. What I've seen in Japan and what I've seen in other, where they really follow this conservation very strictly. There, even a piece of wood is shown clearly marked, which is old. But here, although we, even if you have seen in the first project which I have presented, we have put new timber and old timber, but we have to paint it in a way that it doesn't show outside that we have used old timber. So this is again part of our tradition or culture we follow here, because most of the heritage sites are religious sites, and we cannot leave them like that, because people revert to them, people believe them, people get blessing from them, so they want to see everything beautiful and very, looking very glorified, embellished. For that reason, so definitely, I think we have other projects where it's not religious side. There we have tried to maintain what is old. Whatever I put new, we try clearly show the differentiation. But for those sites, we couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. So, Marvi, before you respond, Pema, I think you have answered the question, but I'm going to read it out. It's in the chat. It's from Naila Ahmad, and she asks you, for Pema, was there any kind of intellectual conflict in your mind regarding the integrity of the structure while tampering, altering, adding to an old traditional structure when you made the changes, additions of windows, doors, etc.? I think you sort of answered it, but if you want to add anything, please go ahead.
Definitely, I think this is one of the, I would say, I would rather say occupational hazards we face, because we know by principles, we do not want to, because there are some things which we feel that we should keep it. But again, it boils down to the custodians, the main users. I want to use as the main users, the custodians, the stakeholders, because there are some wishes they want to, they want to change something, and which we cannot allow. And that's where we do trade-off that, okay, certain part is, again, I mentioned earlier also. So if you follow, I personally do not want to. There are, in my first project, there were a lot of changes which I did not support, but we had a lot of discussions. From my perspective, I presented, we have the steering committee there, we had to make the presentation to the stakeholders, but I think there were a lot of negotiations happened, there were a lot of discussions happened, so over the period of time, and this were the results of the discussions.
Thank you. Marvi, on pedagogy.
Thank you so much, Dhruv, for asking that question. I mean, it also stems from like a democratic spatial practice, right? So you keep on these regular questioning that who owns the place, who is it for? And then the most important one is who is welcome to participate? I mean, these three queries, when I was even like, when I'm teaching on pedagogies of placemaking, I give this exercise, you give them like 6 sites and you tell them to walk and train yourself and gather data, which you have kind of interacted with, and a personal, it's like a embodied experience. So when you start questioning and when you start like talking to the environment, human, non-human, those stem that in an interesting response. And then, I mean, recently in Karachi, there was this phenomena of like encroachment drive where cleansing took place. And when encroachment on the case of, or on the sake of development, now this is something that we always need to counter that what kind of encroachment drives, what benefit does it give to the city and to the people who are living on those contested sites. So democratic spatial practice is something that, you know, I truly think that needs to worked on and need to be taught in classrooms through conversations, through case studies, through looking at complexities in various cities.
And so, Marvi, just to extend that, you know, you said people make and remake the city in a continuous process. So this is exactly
Absolutely.
what you sort of you mean by that, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Pema, of course, Naila Ahmed thanks you for answering the question. Now, suddenly there are 2 questions for you, Marvi. Can I just read them, Dhruv? Can I go ahead and read them?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So one, it says, I enjoyed the conversation. This is from Anushka. I enjoyed the conversation. I just have a comment for Marvi. I think it was fabulous to see the nature of your practice that empowers the individual to keep questioning the relationship of power and their manifestation in architecture in the city. I also think as a collaboration, we often don't think of the public as potential intellectual companions that can participate in the making of the city as well. And probably such interventions can allow them to participate more. So, I mean, I think it's just a comment, so that's fine. For Marvi, thank you very much, Anushka, for that. For Marvi, again, from Shahira Pesanyani. In Karachi, we have the laws, policies, and different individuals and organizations who are working on heritage. What is the way forward? Demolition and deconstruction of buildings in the old town has become a recurrent feature. Also linking this with communities who are living in the old town. With work you have done in Pakistan Chowk, how do communities feel about the buildings they're inhabiting, and there is a sense of ownership or sense to protect it from further decay?
Thanks, Shahira, for the question. I mean, the most important thing is that how are heritage laws made as a common knowledge? That's the problem. It's very, the language of the bylaws is so, it has such a legal framework that people who are living either on pagdi systems or are living in those buildings as part of their own ownership haven't really understood what it means to live in these heritage properties and how do they sustain it in today's time. The infrastructure from plumbing to sanitation, everything has changed or has been archaic, and they feel that it's a burden to live in those buildings. So there has to be this kind of a combination between the government, the architects, the municipality, how to come together rather than working in individual departments. And that's the key problem in our part of the region, where departments are working in isolation and not in a form of like governance of as a collective or as coming together to solve an area or a demographic. So, so the legal notion is the main one of the problems, and then making it as accessible as a public information.
Thank you, Marvi. Dhruv, do you have any questions? We're almost at time, so maybe one last question.
Yeah,
if you have anything.
maybe one. Devashree, who's on the panel, she wants to ask, through all these diverse conservation projects, there may have been numerous learnings about methodology and materials. She's curious to know if you're engaged in the process of documenting and compiling this new knowledge, such that it can be a guideline for others in practice in the future.
This is for Pema.
Yeah, this is for Pema. Or do you think conservation projects are unique and too specific for such guidelines to be helpful for future conservation?
Yeah. Can I just, Pema, just add to reframe it? You can hear us, right? You're on mute, Pema. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a very good question. And again, it also goes back to what I asked about the new and the old. It's almost can the old and conservation and everything you're doing with learning about materials create a handbook or a guide for even new architecture?
Definitely, I think, in fact, we have been working on documenting them, publishing them, and I think as on guidelines, we do have a certain set of principles been set out, but it's very difficult to have a very generic guideline for all the sites, because each sites have their own, uniqueness, and as their own, it's different from each site. So we have to work case by case. Again, here, I would like to stress here that I think they have been questioning, especially on our conservation practice, which is, again, we're adding new to the old and all this here. I think we have been working on value-based approach for conservation. So when you talk about value-based approach here, we talk about more, because our living sites are more on the function. The value is more important on the functionality of the building more than the material, because to keep the tradition alive, the intangible, the living tradition alive, we have to have the building function for that purpose. And to keep the building function, materials has to be changed over the times. For that principles only we change the material. However, we always try to maintain the overall form of the building. So if you look at my first project also, we haven't changed the form. So form is as it is, the functionality has been there. So we kind of enhance the functionality of the building. Again, coming back to the questions of having the guidelines, definitely we do publication, and that's where we create the awareness among the young architects. We induct them, and then we make them understand. We induct them for the documentation of the sites, evaluation and assessment of the sites, to create awareness. We even working with the university here to induct the architecture students when it comes to documentation of heritage sites. So that's how we kind of create awareness to the new upcoming architects, also the professionals in the market also.
Thank you, Pema. We are really at time, but there's such a good question that I'm going to use this as the last question, and then I'll thank you again. This is for Marvi. It's from Ariba Asad. And it says, as we are talking about emergent practices, what is your stance on climate change and more particularly flooding in Pakistan? Maybe you can link this with your work experience with Yasmin Lari.
Thank you. So how do I frame this in terms of my work with Yasmin Lari? It's been now what 8 years that I have not been working directly with her, but I've been looking at her processes of how she's developing the idea of bamboo construction. But my practice, again, is primarily based right now. I'm not working in the rural zone, so she's working more on that spectrum. But looking at Karachi from the flooding perspective, the problem right now is that Karachi has a huge problem with concretization, and the ratio between soft grounds and hard landscape is completely off. And that has created a rupture. So the planning at the moment, the development, especially on the reclaim area, the new land is definitely getting affected with constant floods. The new development doesn't incorporate the natural phenomena, the terrains, the nalas. Then that's not part of their design. That's not part of their ideology. So it's left as something that the governance will take care of. And that's why the rupture in the last 6 years have been so insane. And constantly I would say the designed areas are getting more flooded than the informal settlements. You see, so the older areas are kind of in a better place than the newer areas. And it is interesting to see is because they're not incorporating the natural terrain into their designs. It is such a gated, isolated design fracture that it's completely a different, it would take me an hour to kind of talk about flooding and its consequences. But one needs to understand that the care architecture needs to be now thought of especially in South Asia, where places like river, sea, forests, mangroves are now part of our blueprint.
Thank you. No, that's very and lovely note to end this conversation on, because the idea of care is, I think, something that is a message that came out from both your presentations in very, very strong ways in all the contexts. And that really is the future model of practice. We need to give it more attention. So again, thanks very much. I just want to let everyone know that the next lecture is session is on the 12th of November. It's Studio 4000 from India and Sthanik from Bangladesh. And the following one is 19th November, Ayaz Hoshem from Afghanistan and Noor Khan from Pakistan. Please note there will be a time change, at least in the US. So for us, it'll be earlier. For everyone else, it'll be probably the same time in the evening, but we'll keep you posted on that. And Pema and Marvi, please do attend our conversations. Please come on. If you'd like to join the panel on any of the sessions, let us know, because we want this to be a growing conversation, an informal one among all of us in South Asia. So it's going to be ongoing. So please participate. We look forward to seeing you again. And we thank you both very much for what was a really, really exciting session and wonderful questions, which I think are going to keep us thinking for a while now. So thanks again, and thank you everyone for attending, and see you on the 12th and on the 19th of November again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.